Get into it too deep, and I'm going to bring Randy Hughes up here. I want to thank you, Randy, very much for
Illinois.
Illinois. I don't know why I thought of your website. I saw Texas.
The granddaddy of land trust law, Illinois.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Okay, so we've got Randy Hughes here who's going to talk about land trust, and I'm going to get his information up here. There you go.
All right, thank you.
Got it.
Well, good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
You guys get to live in this town. That's amazing. Yeah. Walk out and take that view. Believe it or not, we don't have this kind of view in Illinois. We just don't. We have a lot of cornfields. No views like that. So I see some familiar faces in the crowd tonight. I was in Pismo Beach last night. I spoke to the group, and there's still some of you glad to see you come back. I must have said something good. My name is Randy Hughes, and if you have questions, we're going to talk about land trust tonight. If you have any questions as I'm talking, go ahead and just raise your hand, and we'll address them at that moment. Now, I know some of you are using land trusts right now. These ladies up here just formed their very first land trust, right? And have an attorney help you do it?
Yes.
Anybody else using the land trust? With your transaction? You have any?
I have been. I have used them in the past.
Okay. Have you, when you set them up, were you setting up a California land trust?
Yeah.
Okay. To pull California property. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about that later on tonight, but just so you know, you don't have to do that. There's no federal land trust law. There's only state law. And so some states are better than others. But we'll get into that. This is a little bit of background on myself. I'm basically a single-family house guy. That's how I make my living, is in the single-family house business. I started buying houses when I was in college in 1969.
69.
69.
Graduated in 73. Yeah, there's up there. And so that's all I've been doing. You know, I have invested in other things, as we were talking outside, apartment buildings and restaurants and commercial buildings, and I'm pretty much a professional at losing money in all those. The only thing I've ever been able to make money at is in the house business, so that's why probably 20, 25 years ago I gave up trying it in any other field other than just houses. I do teach around the United States, although lately in the last few years I've said, you know, I'm only going to teach in California and Florida. So, you know, the rest of the states, they're on their own. I do sell a lot of my home study courses, which are what you see up here, on the internet to people all over the United States. But as far as live seminars, I only teach in California and Florida. It gives me a good opportunity to get out in Illinois and be productive and enjoy the weather. So I do have a couple other classes that I teach and I sell on my website, a privacy and asset protection class and a lease option class. Anybody in here do options, real estate options? You tried that at all?
Lease options, yeah.
Lease options, pure options. They are a fantastic tool, and I think right now, in particular, is a great time to be doing options. Because when the market's down is when you want to go out and get as many options to buy in the future as you can. Lock in these low prices for 5 or 10 years, and then when that option date comes, the values come up, you'll make a lot of money. And there's no management, there's no risk, there's no insurance to buy, no tenants, no toilet, nothing. You just hold the option and sit back and wait. So they're pretty good. But we're not going to talk about that tonight. Yes, Dan?
On your lease options, do you ever do a subject to get into a lease option?
A subject to when I'm acquiring
Right.
on the lease option? Yes. And in fact, what I use are land trusts.
Okay.
I don't do any transaction in real estate without using a land trust because they're applicable in every situation. So if I'm lease optioning your house, I would ask you to put that house into a land trust first, and then we do the paperwork. for a lot of reasons. One is, I don't know what you're going to do. You may go out and get divorced or disabled or go crazy. Do something that might create a lien against that house, and I don't want any liens against the house. And the way to keep any liens from attaching to that house is to use a land trust. So, and the way to sell that to the people is, this is good for you and for me. I don't really know you that well, Dan. You don't really know me. So to protect both of us, let's put this thing in a trust. And so if I do something stupid, you're not affected. And if you do something stupid, I'm not affected. It's a real easy sale, I think. There's my standard disclaimer that says, don't believe anything I say. You gotta stick those in. Here's my basic philosophy in the investing world. Is that we all work very, very hard to try to build some net worth. And we're doing it in real estate. And we could be trying the stock market or the bond market or the restaurant business. They work really, really hard too. But we're in the real estate business, aren't we? And so we're working real hard. We're here on a Thursday night when you could be home with your family. That's sacrifice, isn't it? So it seems to me if you're going to work that hard and you sacrifice it and your family sacrifice because you're here and you're not there with them, you ought to spend a little bit of your time learning how to protect your assets that you're acquiring so you don't lose them to some contingency fee lawyer in the future. Does that make sense? Sure does. And especially the longer you're in this business and the more you accumulate, the more you realize, hey, you know, I had probably 10 houses before I even started keeping files. You know? And I thought one day, wait a minute, you know, I better start organizing this stuff. This is getting out of hand. And then I started thinking, well, you know, all these things, all these properties in my name personally, doesn't that make me more of a target for a lawsuit? And so then I started learning about these trusts. And I've been using them for over 30 years now, and they are wonderful tools. In fact, you will find a booklet I brought to you for free this evening. I wrote this several years ago, and I update it every now and then. It's called 50 Reasons to Use a Land Trust. So the next time somebody tells you, like an attorney, oh, you don't need to use those, they're outdated. We use LLCs. Well, I like LLCs, and I use LLCs. But I always start first with a land trust because of 50 reasons right in here. So I encourage you to read that. It'll really make you think a lot about how to use these things in your real estate business. So why should you care about using a land trust? Well, let's talk about liability here. We as real estate owners, managers, landlords, are more likely to be sued than just about anybody else in any other profession, other than maybe doctors and some of the other professions. But we have a big target on our back, and primarily because doesn't the general public view anybody who owns real estate as wealthy? Isn't that just kind of a general concept? And now, you could be upside down, but you're wealthy. And that's what we have to deal with. The reality of it is whether you are wealthy or not, we have to deal with the reality that society thinks you are. Therefore, you are a target for a lawsuit more than anybody else in most other professions. So we need to mitigate, we need to reduce that exposure by not owning real estate in our personal name. That's dumb. Don't do it. It makes you more of a target. Your number one legal threat. Now, there are other legal threats you're going to have. Come on in, sir. You have other legal threats being in this business, like everybody else. But one of your biggest threats is a contingency fee lawyer. And the reason why is because he will work without payment on the hopes that he's going to get paid when he sues you and wins. Right? So he's going to be the most legal. If you do something to harm somebody, the first thing the attorney is going to do is he's going to look up in the public records if you own anything. Because attorneys are very smart. You can't get through law school being stupid. They understand that there's a big difference between suing somebody and winning and suing somebody and collecting. It doesn't help them at all to sue and win if they never get paid. So they want to make sure, and one of the ways that they make sure is they go to the county courthouse records and they look up your name personally to see if you own anything in your name, primarily real estate, because then there's a perception that there's an asset there that they can go after to get paid. Give you a prime example. I have an acquaintance who lives in Columbus, Ohio. He was a full-time policeman, part-time real estate investor. He worked very hard to get himself in a position where he quit being a cop. He finally was living off his investments. And one day he got a letter in the mail from a law firm. Anybody ever get a letter from a lawyer? Doesn't it kind of make your heart skip a beat when you look at the return? The real smart, sneaky lawyers are now putting, like, instead of their law firm name, they're putting KGB, Inc., you know, just the initials. They get you to open them. But it does make your heart skip a beat, and it's a bad day when you get a letter from a lawyer. Well, he got a letter from a lawyer and it said, one of your tenant's children fell out of the window, it was a first-story apartment building, fell out of the window and was damaged, brain damaged, and we're going to sue you. We're going to sue you not only for the medical bills, but pain and suffering, lost wages because this child is going to be dependent forever. All because you didn't have a screen in that window. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't go around to my properties every day and check to make sure the screens are there. But that's how ridiculous your liability is as a landlord. He got sued. Did he have insurance? Sure he did. They blew right through that. Because insurance companies, when they see a large exposure like that, they'll just write a check for the maximum. I think he had like $300,000 or $500,000 of coverage. They said, here. Because they'll blow right through that in a heartbeat. And he was liable for the difference. And they systematically took every building he had and drove him into bankruptcy. And he went back to being a cop. It's a pretty sad story. Now, I'm not here to try to tell you that a land trust by itself would have prevented that. But it does give you an opportunity to at least be in a position to do some negotiation with your creditors. If the property's in your name, it's a slam dunk off of your head. If it's not in your name and you're the beneficiary of a trust, at least they can't sue you personally and get a judgment and go get that property. It's not as easy. It slows the process down and it gives you a position to negotiate and hopefully come out without total bankruptcy. So, what is a real estate land trust? Just a few pieces of paper. Your trust agreement could be one page. It could be written on a napkin. So you need two documents, a trust agreement and a deed and trust. This trust agreement, right here, could be one page or 1,000 pages, depending on how complicated you want to make it. It's nothing more than a contract between the trustee, who holds title, and you, the beneficiary. Does not get recorded. Remember that. Does not get recorded. So everything you put in that agreement is private, goes in your file only, and nobody sees it. Now, this deed and trust does get recorded. That's what puts the property into the trust in the county in which the property is located. All right? So think of it this way. They had to build this hotel first before they brought in the chairs, right? So you have to build the trust with the trust agreement before you can put property in it with the deed. Make sense? So that's how that works. Here's an important thing for you to remember. If you do use a land trust, you do not own the property. The trustee owns full legal and equitable title to that property. What do you own? What do you own personally? If you have a land trust, what do you own instead of the title of the property? Any ideas? Are you the beneficiary to your land trust that you just set up? Okay, so you own the beneficial interest. 50-50? Okay. You own the beneficial interest in the land trust. You know what's interesting about that? Got a question? What's interesting about that is the beneficial interest of a land trust is personal property, not real property. Now, is that interesting? So think about that. When they built this hotel, it comprised a bunch of personal property, didn't it? The light bulbs and the doors and the windows, all was classified as personal property. Until they stuck it all together and called it a hotel, then it's called real estate. Now we're going to take this building and we're going to dump it into a land trust and convert it back to personal property. That's pretty cool. And the reason why it's cool is Dan was talking about selling on a contract. Has anybody in here sold real estate on a contract? Have you ever had the joy of the buyer defaulting? You have? What happens?
We got the property back.
How long did it take?
About a year and a half.
About a year and a half. Isn't that what we talked about last night? About a year and a half. During that year and a half, you had the enjoyment of making the mortgage payments, if you have a mortgage on the property, while the deadbeat lives there for free, and you're subsidizing his lifestyle for a year and a half. Because you want to protect your credit. This is the reason why you use a land trust when you sell on a contract. Because you're selling personal property, not real property. There are two different sets of laws. I had a tenant once who was an older gentleman who really didn't have much to his name. And I always told him, you know, Frank, you got to buy a house. You need to buy a house. Someday you're going to appreciate the fact that you at least bought something. You can't just rent everything the rest of your life. And finally he said to me, he said, okay, but I don't have any down payment. Will you sell it to me on a contract? I said, yes. This is my philanthropic side, you know. Yes, I will take your damage deposit and convert it to a down payment. And the balance will be on a contract. But what it is that I'm contracting to sell you the beneficial interest in the land trust. Personal property. From a legal standpoint. From the IRS's viewpoint, it's real property. So you get the best of both worlds. So you can deduct the interest and real estate taxes and all that. So several years goes by, Frank's doing well, and then all of a sudden I don't get a payment. So I drive over there and say, where's Frank? I'm driving up. The first thing I notice is the front door standing wide open. That's not a good sign, is it? Front doors aren't supposed to be standing open. So I go inside, the place is empty. Kids have obviously been using it to do whatever kids do. Now, had I sold that property on a contract to Frank, on a standard contract like Dan's talking about, and what you're talking about, is I would have had the fund and legal responsibility and financial responsibility to hire an attorney to represent Frank, because Frank was gone. I'd have to hire my own attorney. I'd have to hire Frank an attorney. They'd go to court. They'd do all the things that lawyers do in court. And eventually I would have disposed of his interest in the property. Yes?
And that's even on a land contract?
That's on a land contract, yeah.
Okay, good.
He has a legal right interest in that house, even if he's disappeared. And I've got to extinguish that. That's expensive and time consuming, and it takes a long time, as he mentioned. Now, what really happened was, I just changed the lots. And I sent out 3 notices per my contract to purchase 5 days. If you haven't paid, your mortgage payment is due on the first of the month. If you haven't paid in 5 days, I'm going to serve you a notice to pay up. If you don't pay up in 5 more days, I'm going to serve you a notice of intent to terminate the contract. And 5 days later, if you haven't paid up, I'm terminating your interest in that contract to purchase the beneficial interest in the land trust. Boom, he's gone. No judicial foreclosure rights, period. He's out, I change the locks, and I'm going down the street.
And before that happened, he had the legal right to claim it on his taxes and have all the write-offs and everything else,
Yes.
even the beneficial
Yeah.
interest.
That's another neat thing about a land trust is, in the eyes of the IRS, it's a pass-through entity. Anything that happens flows right down through the beneficiary. They don't care if it's in your name or in the trust name. You don't have to file a tax return on it. You don't have to get a tax ID number. They are wonderful animals. That idea right there will save you thousands of dollars and many a sleepless night, Dan, if you just do it right.
Which is why I was hoping you'd show up and tell us.
That's one reason to use. I got 50 reasons in there. That's one of them. So, and in fact, I mean, this can be pretty good. I have a daughter who just sold in January a house, doing the same procedure, and the folks were just arrested. They're in jail for tax evasion or something. They were running a cash business. And she had $30,000 in payments since January. And they're in jail. So we went through the procedure, terminated her rights, and changed the locks. And their relatives came and got their stuff, which was good because they had a lot of stuff in the house. We were appreciative of that, but we didn't have to clean the place out. But 30 grand, that's a pretty nice gift. And you can sell a house again. All right, let's get this out of the way. 100 years ago, Chicago Title brought the first land trust to the United States. And there's a long history of land trusts, but suffice to say that they are legal in California. You can use them here. So that's not an issue.
Are there some states that they aren't really legal in?
Well, it's not so much they're not legal, it's just they're so unfamiliar with them that you can't get a title company to insure them. And they're legal but not practical to use, like Michigan. And like Louisiana. Louisiana is still operating under the old French civil laws, believe it or not, whereas the other 49 states are all following common law that came over from England. It's kind of interesting. The ladies, you were supposed to have a lot of tough questions for me, and so far we've been done. So just shout them out. You're ready.
Chicago Title, are they familiar with recording land trusts? Like some title companies kind of don't know what to do?
Well, it's interesting. Somebody mentioned last night at the meeting that they had gone to Chicago Title, and they said, we don't know how to do land trust here in California. And I do run into that from time to time, and I always tell them, call the home office in Chicago. And here's the name of the guy who runs the land trust department, and have him explain it to you. Because you can do it. But you run into that a lot, and it's kind of good news, bad news. Because hardly anybody understands these things, it's difficult to get good, accurate information. That's what I'm here for. I don't expect you guys to study this information as much as I do. So let me be the boring guy who studies this stuff, and I'll teach you the quick and easy version. And that way you will stand out in your area. And what I mean by that is it's a nice feeling to have a real estate transaction close and you be the only one that really knows what happened. That is a good feeling. The attorneys don't know, the seller doesn't know, or the buyer doesn't know which side you're on. And I don't mean that from a deceptive, dishonest way at all. I don't teach people how to use these trusts to take advantage of others. But I do teach you how to protect yourself. That's why I'm here tonight, is to teach you how to protect yourself and your assets so your family ends up with your hard work and efforts. Some deadbeat doesn't. You know, they did a survey. I used to have it in my presentation. I don't know why I don't still, but they did a survey in America the top 5 reasons, the top 5 ways to get wealthy in America today. And they were interesting. One of them was inherit it, win the lottery. None of them were hard work, incidentally. But the top reason was sue. Can you believe that? That's how they want to get rich, is they want to sue. And there are plenty of lawyers that will accommodate. Who should form a land trust? I think everybody should. I really think everybody should. Our dear president owns his house in a land trust in Chicago, Illinois. So, you know, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for us, right? And individuals can form land trusts. Us here. Corporations can form land trusts. Other trusts can form land trusts. Your LLC can. So it's real flexible here. But in general, it's going to be you forming a trust to dump property into. Now, the smartest way to acquire property from day one is to take title from the owner, the seller, directly to your trust. And that keeps you out of the chain of title. Your name never shows up at the courthouse. However, I'm sure everybody in here owns real estate in your name right now. So don't fret. It's still a great idea to get the property out of your name now and put it into a trust. We've got 50 reasons to do it. So don't say, well, since it's in my name now, I guess I might as well give up. It's still to your benefit to get it out of your name. Yes, ma'am?
Do you have any problems with IRA properties and dealing with land trusts?
No. You just make your IRA the beneficiary of the trust.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a Roth IRA that's the beneficiary of the trust. And that kind of works out really cute too, because then because your Roth or your IRA has to have an administrator, right? A third-party administrator. So if the Roth is the beneficiary of a trust, the trust does all this cute stuff over here, and the Roth just has the result. So it gives you the power to do all the cute stuff inside the trust. You follow me? And let it filter on through to the Roth without the administrator having to okay everything you do. See? What can you put in a land trust? Pretty much any kind of real estate or a real estate type asset. This weekend, this Saturday, I'm teaching a all-day land trust course in, where is that? Culver City. And the next day on Sunday, in fact, I brought some of her brochures. Any of you ever heard of Dawn Rickabaugh, the Note Queen? She's here in California. She teaches people, real estate investors, how to buy and sell notes on real estate. Or let's say you sell your property on a contract and then you need some cash. You want to sell that contract. Or you sell it and sell it for all cash, but you took 20 grand in a note. And now you want to get that note turned into cash. That's what she teaches. And on Sunday, she's going to teach a whole day on note. It's called Pumping Paper for Profits. And so what we're going to do is kind of unique. She's going to be in my class, and I'm going to be in her class, and we're going to talk about how to blend land trusts with notes, trust deeds, and that sort of thing, because you can put those kind of interests in a land trust. Options, contracts for deed, leasehold interests, air rights, mineral rights, ground rights, all that stuff you can dump in the land trust. All right, everybody with me so far? Is this good stuff so far?
Yes.
Good. Yes, Dan?
Your personal residence in land trust?
Yeah, you can. You can. The only caveat I always mention is there are 3,200 counties in the United States, and every one of them has a different way of doing things. So before you put your personal residence in a land trust, you might check and make sure that you can still get the homestead exemption. Because some counties, not many, but some counties will not let you get the homestead exemption if you put it in a trust.
Does that get rid of your write-off, your Your
No.
mortgage payments?
No, everything flows through, remember?
Okay.
Everything flows through the beneficiary.
Okay.
Do I get a discount because I'm living in my house and taxes, yeah?
Homestead exemption?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to make sure you continue to get that. How should you hold title to your real estate? How do you own it now? Well, a lot of attorneys recommend that you use an LLC. A land trust is primarily a privacy tool.